So welcome, thanks for coming for our first instalment of our webinar series. So the thing that I've called 2020, the year of living vicariously. Or we could call it lifelong lockdown learning, perhaps, if we want to use a bit of alliteration. So I think it makes sense because, you know, we're already living a long way from each other. So connecting virtually should be a great thing for Nuffield to do. And as it turns out, the whole world's got to get used to it. So we're in a very big boat with a lot of other people at the moment. I'm really concerned though that maybe some of you are suffering from a bit of Zoom fatigue. We are all being bombarded with Zoom meetings and webinars at the moment. So I really appreciate you coming on tonight or this morning or the middle of the night, wherever you happen to be. And I appreciate it's really hard to continue to listen and engage in this format. Now, this is a little bit different because it's a webinar, not a Zoom meeting. So as you will have already worked out, all the attendees are on mute. So the only people that will be able to talk is myself and our two panelists, Linda and Tom, who are also on mute at the moment. You can't change that. We also can't see you, and you can't change that either. So I apologise to all of you that dressed up tonight, as did I, but it was in vain because we can't see you. So we are recording this session. So the recording will be available tomorrow if you'd like to listen to it again, or for those that can't join us tonight. And online we have our 2020 scholars, but we also have some of our country executives. We also invited the Nuffield International board members, the Nuffield Australia board members, and also the Nuffield Australia state chairs. So welcome, Abby. I know we've already been chatting, Abby and I. Abby's our state chair in Tasmania in Australia, and we're hoping that our state chairs will be able to run some events that are similar to this, and we just want to see what's going to be best, whether it's Zoom meetings or whether it's webinars like this. So that's just a bit of housekeeping. A bit more is that you can write in that chat. I think all of you are fairly familiar with how this works. You've got the chat, but we'll also have the Q&A. So there's a Q&A panel for questions, and I'll be monitoring that as we go through. So if you've got questions that you want to ask, please do so through the typing in the Q&A window. We are going to run some polls. Now, the Australians know that I totally fluffed that last time and it didn't work, but I think we've got the polling working, so we're going to do some polls as well. And there will be a post-webinar survey that you'll get the link to, so please fill that out for us and we can make sure that we do this the best that we possibly can to help you in your scholarship year. So, firstly, to try out the chat feature, if you would all just type in the chat where you're dialing in for, it'd be great to know who we've got online so everyone can see. So you've got the option in chat, you can go all panelists or you can go particularly to one person. But if you do it to all panelists, we've got Emma, who's in Scotland, Nicola, welcome Nicola from South Australia, Paula's in Perth, Anakin's in the Netherlands, hi Anakin. Hannah in the UK, Ben from New Zealand, Bruce from Ireland. Thanks everybody. It's good to virtually see you. Well, you know, I put up this slide because we could all be on a tropical island right now. Maybe we should have stayed. Things have been a bit rough in certain parts of the world since we were all on our island. But, you know, we were right because we had our Nuffield Ale, and that's what got us through the COVID crisis in March, and I'm very pleased to report, as you know, that none of us got sick. So I'd like to test our polls feature if I could, with a short poll to start. Wait for the rural internet. You should be able to see that now. There's only one question. Have you participated in a Zoom webinar before? So I'll give you a few seconds to fill that out. Now this poll is open to everyone, but we've got two more polls later in the presentation, and I'd really appreciate it if only the 2020 scholars participated in polls 2 and 3 because they are specific to your learning journey. Bit of dead air. I don't think we're allowed to have dead air, are we? It's bad if you're in radio. Okay, we've got almost everybody that's finished filling in their survey. So we'll end the poll there. And then I can share the results with everybody. See, Australian Scholars, I got it right. So we've got a few that have never been on a webinar, a couple with once, the majority with a few times, and yeah, as I thought, there are some of you out there in your pajamas. Gee, actually not as many as I thought, because for some of it's evening and some of it's early morning. So thanks for doing that. So this is our Nuffield box that's got some tools in it and it's got some memories in it from the CSC. So I encourage you now to open up your Nuffield box, and we've got two panelists that are going to put some tools in it with their presentation tonight, which is Linda Eldredge, beg your pardon, Linda, and Tom McCue. So I will unmute Linda and Tom, and I will be able to share their video when I figure that out. Here we go. And I'll hand it over to Linda and Tom.
Hi all. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. Now we can get this show on the road, as they say. So thank you so much for asking us, Jodie, to actually be part of this. Tom and I had an interesting journey together. And so we wanted to share with you some of the things that we did that actually really worked for us. And also, I'll put my hand up, I'm the 2012 scholar. And Tom is actually, he was working for an RDC, which he'll actually explain. And we had some very close synergies in terms of like our research. And so we decided to actually like connect together and actually go travelling and researching together. Now we thought the meeting objectives today, we kept them fairly short. We're trying to do this snappy and actually with some good visual outcomes. But we want to give you some advice on preparing for these meetings and domestic and global research. And we've actually given you some case studies so that you can actually look at things a little bit differently in terms of, you know, how you prepare going forward. Just having a little bit of trouble getting this slide to go on. There we go. Now, I'll say g'day. I'm Linda. I'm actually from the Clare Valley in South Australia. Tom will actually talk about where he's actually living and what it's like over there. But this is actually a photo of my farm, or our farm. So we've got a 7th generation property, and I took this photo as I was travelling back from the Clare Valley, which is our local town about 10 minutes away. And I turned around, there's this magnificent rainbow where over our crops and over our hills. So I took that photo. The quote underneath is one that I particularly love, and I think it so signifies our journey as Nuffield Scholars. It is all about we go and we seek and we learn and we be involved in other people's lives and other people's business and bring the best back with us. So it's a quote that I absolutely love and I quote it all the time. Just to give you an insight into like our lives. So this is me in my shearing shed. I am married. My husband is just on the left-hand side there, poking his head in one of the photos. Basically we've got a son and a daughter, and we've got a daughter-in-law and soon to have another daughter-in-law. And so our 2 children have both actually been in the forces. We've got a long history of military in our family, but they're both coming back. We've got our son who's just come back about a month ago. He left a corporate job in Sydney, he and his partner, to come back farming. And Jessica and Amy are coming back farming in about a month's time. So not only has COVID made big changes in the world, but there's been big changes in the Eldredge household as well. Just down the bottom where you can see I've got what the topic I had for my Nuffield scholarship, which was actually using low-cost cloud-based technology to assist with innovation and efficiencies in agriculture. So as we go through the journey in the story, you'll see how that was something that I was quite passionate about. With you think back in 2012, 2013, they were really only just starting to talk about cloud technology. And I wanted to find management tools that we could interface and actually make business decisions out in the field. And so that was something I was quite passionate about. Just a little insight into our farm. We've got 2 farms, one in the Clare Valley, or just outside the Clare Valley, and one in Appler, and, which is about an hour north of us. We have winter season crops. We grow cereals, hay, all season legumes. We have around that 450 to 470 mil rainfall per annum. It is basically into spring rainfall. We don't get a lot. We have terminal droughts basically over summer and autumn. And beautifully over the last couple of days, we've just had 50 odd mils of rain. So we've had a bad drought in South Australia for the last few years. So everyone's jumping up and down at the thought that we've actually got moisture. We have a lot of merinos. We've actually swapped a lot to merino ewes mated to white Suffolk size because we see protein as the way to go in establishing our business going forward. This is a screen capture of my website, and we will actually be talking a little bit more about that later. The other thing I do, and it's absolutely has evolved so strongly after my Nuffield Scholarship journey, is I have a consulting business which is quite bespoke and quite unique. And I have about 50 clients all over Australia. And thankfully, we have actually been using Zoom for a number of years, and like everyone else, I'm just swamped with Zoom meetings at the moment, but we can keep in contact. I did a lot of, my background is I grew up in a pig and poultry and broadacre farm. I actually started in a bank and I became an agri manager. From there, I actually gave that up and when my children were little and went and did some study and got a degree. From there, I actually did a lot of training. I took about 1,000 people across the state and South Australia through agribusiness training, from diploma all the way through to an MBA, and we did that all out in the country. When I did my Nuffield Scholarship, I came back and decided I'd actually come to the ground level with people and concentrate more on my consultancy, and it's just absolutely boomed, which is wonderful. But I have all the issues with succession planning, how I can actually move this forward as well, but that's a whole nother story. Okay, I'm just going to show you, this is another screen shot of my website. My son actually did my website. I woke up one morning, he was over in the Greek Islands, he sent me a message, said, "Mum, I hate your website and I built you a new one." And this is what he did for me, which I think is the best presents I've ever got, because he wrote all the words about me. And it was him that actually put "G'day, I'm Linda." And I said to him, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Because whenever you meet people, Mum, you say, 'G'day, I'm Linda.'" So this website, obviously, I think connects with my clients, but I sat in a meeting the other day with a CEO of a mining company. That company was worth $500 million, and we were doing some mediation between them and the landowners. And he said, "I looked at your website." And I said, "Oh my goodness, what do you think?" He goes, "I absolutely loved it." Very informal, but he loved it. Okay, I'm going to go on. Jodie, can you unmute Tom? Yeah.
Thanks, Linda. Well, as you can see, I'm Tom McCue. I have worked in research and development for nearly 20 years, and my background is actually from a science background, but I also have been involved in a family farm as a child in the Snowy Mountains region of southeast New South Wales in Australia. My present role, I'm the Senior Manager of Emerging Industries at a rural research and development corporation here in Australia called Agrifutures Australia. I'm based in Wagga Wagga, and certainly from the point of view of our company, our role is to develop research and development programs with a vision to grow the long-term prosperity of Australian rural industries. So we're looking at a number of ways in which we do that through a more commercial approach to research and innovation for practice change across numerous rural industries and regional communities. So it's a national role, and so while I'm based in Wagga, I do a lot of work right across all the different agro-ecological zones of Australia to help in research and development. I'm currently looking at a portfolio called Emerging Industries. That's largely targeting everything that has growth potential in Australia's agricultural sector, from industrial hemp through to crocodiles through to chocolate. So it's a diverse portfolio, but it builds upon what I've previously done in extension, ag tech and entrepreneurship and farm business management for that matter. So it's bringing the science and business of farming together. Just before I go into this project, I certainly have a long experience in many different facets of research, development and extension. Currently, I'm working on insect protein strategies for research and development, and I've done other work in the past in biosecurity plans, specifically for the animal sector, looking at how we can develop and enhance our preparedness and our response. But I guess part of the reason why you're all here tonight and part of the reason why Linda's asked me to come along is really just to talk about some work that we did in 2013 with the Grains RDC, which is the Grains Research and Development Corporation. This organisation was presently spending in the order of 178 million per annum in the grains industry. And so some of the key areas that we were looking at in the company at the time were things like supporting innovation ecosystems, the use of robotics, drones and data, IoT technologies, and farm trial and broad acre scale applications for information management, such as disease forecasting, surveillance and predictive capabilities. So it was a pretty dynamic approach from the organisation at the time, and really what you'll see in the next few slides is some of the real lessons that we learnt working together. So I might pass back to Linda to just talk about some of the early phases of the project.
Okay, so basically Tom and I, obviously there's a synergy in our research, and we worked out there was synergy because Tom and I have a common friend, a mutual friend. And so what happened was Tom actually rang me one day, and I didn't really know him. And he said, listen, I think that we've actually got some really strong synergies in what we're looking at. It's quite cutting edge where we want to go. And he said, do you think that we should combine and actually do this together? And I said, absolutely, because what I didn't want to do was just go the same road that a lot of Nuffield Scholars go. And I couldn't, because my project was so based on cloud technology, what analytics were out there. I'm a bit of an analytics geek, what data was out there. And so I said, yes, look, let's travel across America. And we had contacts that we could pull in. And so we basically, we actually mapped out a series of things that we were going to do. And so when I say packing your toolbox in preparation, these are some of the things that we actually did, and we're quite deliberate about it. One of the first things we did was actually well, when you make contact with someone, we felt that the level of places that we were going to go to and where we were trying to get into, we talked a lot about the elevator pitch. And so we started on our own professional development plan, specifically designed and styled to actually help us get into these places that were very difficult to get into. And some of the places you will see later, where we got into Facebook, we got into some really blue sky stuff. We got into John Deere at the highest level. And so one of the first things that we did, we said we need professional photographs of ourselves. So Tom had some from work. You guys may all have some from your work, but I didn't have any professional photographs. So I paid about $300 or $400 for a photographer to come out to my place and actually take some photographs of me on my farm. And you can see that up in the top left-hand corner. The other thing that we were very mindful of and spoke a lot about was that in actually putting forward those professional photographs, we also need to actually frame up almost like a CV, and so that we can actually attach that CV to people that we're contacting. Now, that's only if you get past the first part, which is the elevator pitch, and that has to be very snappy and very appealing to people. So we would use our photographs, and people like the fact that we're out in the country. But then we actually did a whole heap of research on the people we're trying to contact, and we tried to explore a thing called the emotional intelligence. How do we actually connect with those people? We've got one chance. What do we do? And so we actually did a whole heap of backgrounding on people before we actually made contact. And when we made contact, whatever way we did, we were very specific in the way that we tried to connect with them emotionally. So I would actually encourage all of you guys to actually read some stuff about emotional intelligence. I've actually got the arrow going down TED Talks are fantastic about emotional intelligence. There's a number of podcasts. You can see there's a little sign there that says team management systems. Now, I know you all did the DIS model when you actually did your CSC. I actually went and did the training for team management systems, and you get a 20-25 page profile that's specifically about how you work. Okay, I actually shared that with Tom because I said, if we're going to travel together for 2 or 3 weeks, you need to actually see what I'm like when I'm working. And so he could read that. He shared stuff with me. So we actually had a good understanding of how we were with each other in terms of when we're under pressure, when we're working, what we like to do. So we did a whole heap of work on that before we actually even left the country. The other things I'm encouraging people is to build a website. As I said, some of those screenshots that you saw before where it said, "G'day, I'm Linda, I'm in the crop," that's actually that website that my son actually built for me. And he did it through Squarespace. There's a number of other things, but basically it's $200 a year and such good value. And so when we actually were sending off emails and things like that, I did have a terrible old website, but we at least had a link. And that's what people want to do in this day and age, is they just want to click and a link and see what that person's about. So it's that kind of that first look, that professionalism that you can actually build in making a contact. You then have to actually link it to all of your social media, wherever, like Facebook, Instagram. There's just so much out there, but you have to have it that you can link it through. The other thing that I would encourage, and this is just a little bit left field, but I know of someone in another industry that got onto a media consultant and they helped them write a few things. But the media consultant somehow actually cleaned up what was out there on the internet that was actually probably a little bit unsavory. And it was just that person had some bad press and stuff like that. And I don't know how they did it, but they managed to either get rid of it or drive it right down. And so I don't think that you should discount actually if you think it would work for you and it would give you a leg in the door and strengthen up your elevator pitch to actually look at a media consultant. Don't spend too much, but it's probably another tool that you could look at. The other thing that, and I always remember this, every time we went everywhere, Tom, they loved his accent. And so they would actually go, "Oh, you're an Aussie, we love your accent." And it was actually really good branding for us. And so we did actually play on that and would tell people we're from Australia. And that actually, I honestly think that got us in some doors as well. Because we would sit in the front. Sometimes we thought that could get in for a meeting and they wouldn't reply to us. So sometimes we just turned up and sat in the reception room and asked if we could see people. And as soon as they knew that we were Australian, or each country has its own particular branding, they were much more open to actually talking to us. The other one down the bottom, which is LinkedIn, I'll let Tom talk a little bit about that because he's got a huge LinkedIn profile, but that will certainly help you when you're looking for contacts. All right, so this is the elevator pitch. Be professional, make it snappy, have a link so that people can quickly check out who you are. I'll hand over to Tom.
So we're just going to do sorry, Tom, I've got you on mute because we're just going to do a short poll here if we can.
Yeah.
So this poll is about how prepared you are, just in terms of what Linda's just been talking about. Just take a little while. There we go. So there's 3 questions for this one. Good to see a lot of you have websites by the look of it. Linda, you'll be interested in, I think, in the results of the 3rd question. So there's not a lot of the scholars that are really putting much in place with our PD plan. So I hope that the stuff you've been sharing has been interesting there.
Yeah. Look, I said to the photographer, make me 10 kilos lighter and 5 years younger, and she actually did a pretty good job. So it's amazing what they can do with photographs, I think.
Just wait a couple more minutes and then we can end the poll.
Yeah.
A couple more seconds.
Maybe while they're doing the poll, like it might be a case study that like there's some really good TED Talks and that out there, and we actually send you a bit of information about like the team management systems and things like that, if that's something that you actually want to explore a bit further.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good, Linda. It just if you have a kind of you know, top few go-to resources you'd like to share, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. We'll get that out to people.
Okay, we'll just end that poll and I'll quickly share the results. So mostly people don't have professional photos except ones that have been taken by the media. A lot of intention to get a website. Have one. And yes, it's very ad hoc PD plans.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda.
Cool. No problems. I'll hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Linda and Jodie. And yeah, I guess we've talked about preparing your profile and yourself for hitting the marketplace. What I'm going to talk to a little bit now is utilising the networks and the importance of good planning. So a couple of things that I want to just raise that were critical to the success of the trip. I guess the first one is find mentors and networks based on the project that you're intending to do. So in the image you can see on the top left there's a gentleman named Bruno Basso. He's from the University of Rome and does work with Michigan State University in the United States. Linda and I were fortunate enough to meet with him earlier prior to the trip. And we had quite good discussions about a whole range of aspects of crop nutrition, but then the concept of understanding some of the networks that he had also gave us leads and tactics of people that we might want to explore in different parts of the world. So certainly I encourage you to really use your networks, that particularly ones that have good influence both domestically and internationally, to help you deliver that approach that you're trying to achieve in your projects. Just make sure when you meet and discuss your objectives that you're clearly outlining what you're trying to achieve. And I think one of the things that worked between Linda and I, as she's mentioned, is we had ongoing dialogue, and that didn't just include on the trip, it was certainly before the trip as well. So make sure that you get your objectives set. As we've pointed out, there's a lot of pre-meeting work that you need to do. Make sure that you think about the questions that you want to ask. Don't assume that you can just show up on the day and ask those questions. So do some structure. Look at anything that you can send to the people that you're intending to visit in advance, so that they get some context of who you are, what you're trying to achieve, but also what they're going to get from the meeting themselves as well. So it's important to check those as early as possible so that you've got the best chance of success when you do meet. Make sure that you're clear whether you're going to have a formal or an informal agenda when you go into a meeting. So just make sure that everyone's on the same path and that you all know what you're trying to achieve. And sometimes a formal agenda is the way to facilitate that process. Make sure that you also know, when it comes to facilitation, who's the person that's going to drive the meeting? Is it going to be one or all, or are there elements that you're going to take in turns together to have that discussion? It's really important because it conveys a professional image, but it also helps the meeting flow well when you do meet with them face to face. Importantly, one of the things I'd stressed here is don't hassle. Certainly make sure that you give people adequate time to respond to you, but also just bear in mind that that people have commitments, and you can see in the top right corner there's an email that I received when we were trying to plan a visit between the US and Canada. And certainly there were other things that got in the way, some pre-planned, some unexpected. So just be ready for that when you're doing your planning. And then importantly, make sure that after you've met that you follow up with them. And in our instance, we use things like business cards, postcards, and we even bought small little gifts like R.M. Williams leather key rings. And, you know, it's a small token and gesture, but hugely important to get that rapport with the people that you're trying to meet. So I might just pass back to Linda to just talk about some of the other objectives that we were covering.
Just quickly, I was my scholarship was funded by Grain Growers, and they actually had an economist who was a professor from Sydney University, I think, and he acted as a mentor for me. And sometimes your mentoring is just a single line or something like that actually gives you such value. And we're all overwhelmed with data, and we're starting to get overwhelmed with that then. And I said to him, how do I know what data is important? And he said, at the time that the data doesn't make any difference to your business anymore, you need to move on to the next data. Don't keep collecting the data. And that was a really important line. So if you get a good mentor, sometimes it's just those key words that you need to remember as you're doing your research. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. This was my key objectives. So Tom and I sat down and said, well, what are our key objectives? So I said, here's my key objectives. What I've actually got highlighted in orange is basically when we go to the next slide, what was Tom's key objectives that he had to achieve through his organisation and his stakeholders. And so we looked at that and we said, we've actually got enough key objectives here that we can actually do this together because we've got such synergy. And the other thing is when Tom was talking about the pre-planning that, we didn't spend days, we spent weeks pre-planning. But when I look at all the meetings we had, we actually flew and met each other. But, you know, we lined up. Tom was there for 4 weeks and I was there for about 2.5. In that 4 weeks, Tom had 48 meetings and I can't remember how many flights we had. I think I had something like 29 or 30 meetings and there was an enormous number of flights. So the logistics of it was huge. And at times we were absolutely exhausted because we were running from one meeting to the next. And it's like when you do your contemporary scholars, like your CF, when you're going tour. But you have to do that because you do have situations sometimes where people actually let you down. So we'd have 3, 4, 5 meetings in a row and we'd be on a plane that night heading somewhere else. Tom, did you want to add any more to that? Jodie, we might need to unmute him.
Okay. Just a small point to add here is you can see from those last 2 screens, and there's a lot of words in there, that we had multiple objectives. Some were quite unique to us, others were quite similar. And I guess from the point of view why I'm raising it is, even though we had some different objectives, I can't stress how important it was to have industry and funders working together in the planning, but also in the implementation, because there's certainly brought different aspects to the consultation when we did meet together. I'll probably leave it at that because we've got a few interesting parts to move on. So I'll pass back to you, Linda.
So Tom, just before we move on, we've got a couple of questions that are, specifically about those points. One is from Emma in Scotland asking what's an adequate amount of time to wait for a reply before chasing? So, where's the line between hassling and not? And then there's one more question, so I'll let you answer that one.
So it's a really good question. I think certainly from the purpose of our planning, what I would say is plan early. I guess the closer you leave it to the time that you're going to visit, the less time you're going to have for a response. And there's nothing worse than putting things on people at the last minute, particularly the caliber of some of the people that we met. You need to give them probably months notice so that they can actually plan their schedules, that they can arrange within their organisation some of the key logistics, that they can get skills and expertise from within their organisations to meet. So there's not a formula as such. All I would say is the earlier the better, but also think about the deadlines of when you're traveling and when you would, and actually come up with a date when you'd like to have the majority of your plan locked in, so that you give yourself adequate time, but you also give the people that you're going to meet adequate time to respond to you.
So there's one more question as well, which is to Linda. Bernie's asking from his very cold home office, he tells me, in the southern tablelands of Australia. We asked Linda if you shared your objectives or purpose points before the meeting or kept it spontaneous.
No, like basically, like Tom and I are actually planning out how we'd actually like do this. I can't remember if I sent them through to you, Tom, but we certainly I sent them through, and then he sent his through, and then we had a meeting at some stage where we caught up and actually like mapped out where we thought that we had such commonality. Because what we didn't want was that like basically we all went towards robotics, where I was looking at social communities and things like that. And which is what Tom was looking at too, because he was managing a program that was all about like social interaction, social communities, weren't you, Tom? And so
definitely around ag technology, certainly wanting to be at the cutting edge. So there certainly was early planning from both accounts, even though we both had, well, in Linda's instance, she had a Nuffield scholarship to progress, and for me it was making sure that as a research and development corporation that we were really testing the waters globally in terms of some of the new application technologies that have relevance to Australian agriculture. So
and
common interest.
And we drew down to some words, and so some of the words that we drew down to is this thing, participatory approach to innovations in technology, because that was very much the bent for me with social media, Facebook, and can we work with them? Can they actually have some social responsibility towards agriculture and actually help us develop things that we can use out in the field? We looked at disruptive innovations, and that was a big one for Tom and I, automation, robotics. We looked at the social communities and what were the technology drivers that were out there at the time. So we took it from kind of way out here with our objectives to key parts of our objectives to key words. That's how we brought it down. And I think what it did is it just kept us on track, didn't it, Tom, when we were doing this stuff?
Certainly did. And probably just to add to that, certainly we had a strong focus in disruptive innovation. When we met with a lot of our people in the United States, some examples on those photos include companies like Fall Capital, which was a startup, and it capital raised $100 million in less than a year to actually develop advanced agronomy packages through to sensors and diagnostics through to social media. So certainly it was important to get a good breadth, but also to engage with people that were really taking risks and cutting edge as well. So certainly,
and we tried to bring some academia into, like you can see with the graph there. The technology, is it high radical, low incremental, and was it breakthrough? And so every time we actually met with someone after a brief and say, where do we position this technology? And we also probably had a view whether or not it would work or not, didn't we, Tom? And sometimes we were wrong. Anyway, I'll move on to the next thing. Is there any more questions, Jodie, or that's it?
No, we'll keep going, Linda. There's more questions, but we'll get towards the end. Yep.
Just quickly, we thought it'd be really interesting for you guys to actually run through 3 case studies that actually happened to us on the road. And the first one is Facebook. And I want to say here, just don't ever give up trying to get into some of these places. They are like Fort Knox, but we managed to get into Facebook and it was amazing. Tom's going to talk through that one. The second case study is John Deere, and we went to the highest level with them, and we were with the research and innovation executives. It was a fabulous meeting, but things went wrong. And it's about how you retrieve a position when something's going wrong. And the third one is just a cultural thing that I want to talk to you about, which happened in China when I walked the Great Wall of China. So I'll basically go through the case study one. This is a map of where we went all over the US and the people that we connected with. Tom, did you want to talk about this, or shall we move on to the case?
Just very quickly with this one, all I want to say is we use tools such as Google Map, and we created our own maps. It's really helpful to help you organise your logistics to, obviously batch and culture the people that you want to meet with, and secondly, it also enables you to get an understanding of where the key research and other organisations that you might be doing your study on are actually located. Helps in organising your logistics and planning. But you can see from that map down, we met with a lot of different organisations, and all had very differing opinions. So I can't stress enough the importance of planning. So, but we'll move on in the interest of time.
Okay.
So the first case study was Facebook. So certainly, I think one of the things that I will mention to you from that last map is we had quite a wide scope of organisations that were attending to target throughout the trip. When it came to the Silicon Valley component, certainly we had quite a number of large multinational companies that we were targeting. From the point of view, from our planning, we did actually have clear objectives for all the providers. An example here, one of many of the options that we're looking at was gamification for agricultural education. So there's a package called Farmville, which many of you may know. It's a platform used, it's a game which kids and teenagers played at the time to grow their own farm, but owned by Facebook. And certainly one of the objectives for us was to look at whether or not we could embed real life agronomy and R&D into that platform. And so that was one of quite a number of different objectives that we had in terms of engaging people, from basic sort of elementary activity right through to advanced things like GPS, laser, optical, and other application software that we could potentially use as new farming tools. When it came to approaching Facebook, as Linda pointed out, we thought the doors were actually closed on this one. We spent weeks trying to engage with different people at Facebook, and certainly we were getting a lot of closed doors, but it was just by chance that we allowed some time in the itinerary to have some flexibility as well. And I actually participated in a University of California Privacy and Technology project, which was actually held with the Attorney General's office in San Francisco while we were there. My goal there was to look at the state of privacy and technology for data sharing. And what came out of that was one of the keynote speakers there was actually from Facebook. So we're actually at Twitter headquarters in San Francisco, and just so happened that she was presenting on privacy, which I also had an interest in. And I guess our persistence really paid. So I actually approached her and explained what we were trying to achieve. Suddenly got quite a lot of interest from her. So there's a picture of her in the photo on the screen. So Ali, who worked at Facebook in the legal division, actually managed to line us up to actually go through quite a number of divisions in Facebook. And so, what you see on the screen about it's a working person's Disneyland is absolutely spot on. The innovation there is beyond comprehension, but certainly we had quite a number of interactions with various departments in the Facebook headquarters, and just really had some fascinating insights from within. I guess the important thing for us is that we also introduced many of the staff there to agriculture. So certainly it's a big commodity sector like construction and mining and other sectors, but certainly we were able to paint a context of the agricultural requirements for social media as well. So
it was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the lessons we learned, Linda, was really, let's have a clear mission statement with any person that we intend to engage. Keep persisting. I mentioned earlier, like, don't hassle, but persist in your own motivation to try and get to those places. So do it sensibly, but sometimes persistence does pay off if you keep trying, and make sure that you actually ensure that whoever you're meeting, that there's a benefit for them meeting you as well, whether it's improving their context of Australian agriculture right through to just understanding what's happening in Australia. I think it's really important to do that when you're visiting.
I think, and even with COVID happening, and we're seeing the scrabble for food security, like you guys are going to have such a great journey when you get out there, because these big companies actually want to be part of a solution. And we were enticing these guys, saying like agriculture is so important, like we all need to work together. And look, I have to say, we won't dwell too much or talk too much about this, but it was the most amazing, inspiring workplace I've ever been in. And we walked through one of the buildings, and Alex said, "Oh, there's Zuckerberg," so we kind of waved at him, and it was just incredible, the whole experience that day. So persistence paid off, and good on Tom for getting us in there. Right, the next case study is a John Deere one, and Tom, if you want to talk about that, maybe,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, but just also like understand that like we're in this meeting with these execs, and I just want to like say this, that you have to dress up for this stuff. We dressed up, and we had a situation, and we presented well. But anyway, I'll let Tom talk through that with you.
Yeah, so the second case study that I wanted to flag obviously was we actually went to John Deere head office in the Midwest of the United States, and fortunately through some of the networks that we had through my role in GRDC, I was able to actually maintain contact with quite a number of senior level executives in the company, and arrange meetings with their strategy executives and some of their innovation team. On the day when we arrived, as Linda pointed out, yeah, we were very well dressed for the occasion, given the caliber of the people that we were talking to. These were actually executives that actually deliver John Deere's strategy globally. So, it's something that we had to make sure that we were well prepared on, and I think we were. Most of the people around the table when we met were actually the senior staff, and they were quite willing to talk about all aspects of the business to us. One element that we didn't plan as well as we would have liked to was we also were accompanied by a third party in the room on the day. That person actually had a different interpretation and motive to what we were anticipating to get from the meeting, and as a result, the actual dynamics of the meeting was quite disruptive, to the point where this person actually took control of the meeting, and quite quickly you could see the body language around the table diminishing rapidly. So fortunately, Linda and I both saw the problem, and as a result, we intervened and facilitated the discussion to get the discussion back on track, and actually not dilute what that person was after, but do it in a respectful and meaningful way that that helped those at the meeting to actually have a good dialogue. So it was really important, and I think the thing that we would say to you is make sure that if you're engaging with people that you do your preparation, but if you're going to have others in the room, do the same. Make sure that we're all on the same page when you move in.
Yeah.
The good outcome out of all of this is, despite the fact that this occurred, we've managed to maintain long-term relationships, and I still to this very day, 7 years on, have regular dialogue with some of the senior people at John Deere, which is great. So lessons for applicants: use your emotional intelligence at all times. Make sure you get the vibe of who you're talking to. Make sure you brief the whole team. And last but not least, just be genuine. If things don't go well, make sure that you have contingencies in place to deal with it, so that you can keep the dialogue running and build those relationships that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And we just want to quickly touch on non-disclosure agreements. And so Tom will just quickly talk about this company that we went to see in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, so last one from me will be a company called Blue River Ag, which many of you may know about. So basically, the only thing I would state here is the importance of non-disclosure agreements. Make sure that if you are likely to encounter those, that you're prepared to sign them, because often you need to sign them on the day when you arrive, and be really clear about what that actually means in terms of what you can and can't do. I would say to you, be careful of understanding the sensitivities, you know, like for example, taking photos, making sure you can actually talk to people within your own organisation, or whether you're not permitted to do so, but also what you can actually communicate when you go back to your homeland and talk to your peers and colleagues. And you can see in that example that we've got on the screen, there's a photo of us with them, but quite deliberately we've masked the technology because we couldn't actually show what was being displayed. So we had to verbally discuss a lot of the outcomes to my colleagues in GRDC, so that we could have that meaningful conversation. Last but not least, we were really blue sky when it came to some of the people that we visited. This particular company was actually sold 4 years later. John Deere actually acquired them for $305 million. So I think the thing, if you do your planning, you can actually meet people, but be prepared that they will not necessarily disclose everything to you. Just make sure that you're ready for NDAs if they occur.
In fact, I would actually say, Tom, that like in making contact, that elevator pitch, sometimes you should put right up front that you're willing to sign an NDA, so they actually understand that you have a level of professionalism about meeting with them.
Yep. So I might pass back to you, Linda, for the next case study.
All right, just a quick one, guys. This is when things go wrong. So if it doesn't work out, think it out. And so you will find that you'll be on the road and meetings are cancelled, or what you thought you would find somewhere you don't find. So always my fallback experience was to actually go as cultural as I could. So I went up to Beijing. I had with my travels, I actually travelled in and out of Australia a lot because I had a farming business. I also had a consulting business, and I also had a 15-year-old at home, and son was actually off in the RAF at that stage. And so I felt that I needed to like be all part of that, but mostly I need to be a mum. So basically I took Jessica with me, my 15-year-old, on one of the trips. I would just fly around the world and come back home. And so I'd be away for say 3 or 4 weeks at a time. I got to Beijing, and what I thought I'd find, I didn't find. And so we were there for 3 or 4 days. So I got on TripAdvisor, said I'll do a Great Wall of China hike, which never put hike, because then you do something like this, which I had 3 days of a mile up and a mile down. You can see how steep that wall is. And so I think it's like my own personal marathon. But you know what, that experience where I went very to the ground and went cultural, I had a very learned Chinese guide, very serious, but he taught me so much about the history. And he also taught me so much about like where the Chinese as a country were going. And so for 3 days, I listened to him and I asked him questions. And I guess my thing I want to say is that the best predictor of future behaviour is quite often what has happened in the past. So I came back and I said to some of my very marginal clients in my consulting, look, you know, what happens in the past, or what has happened in the past, is when a country gets more money, the women take control of the money somewhat, and they buy food, and they buy better food. So I said to him, I think that we need to, the cost of capital is killing us in these marginal areas trying to crop. Let's actually like do all the figures and do all the analytics and look at the enterprises, and maybe we need to swap you more to sheep, and not so much for the wool, for the protein, because these Chinese people are going to actually buy protein so their children are healthy and stronger than what their generation is. And so just by that experience with that bloke actually gave me such an insight. I've actually got an MBA and I did not do that well in economics, but when I got on the road and I actually understood global economics in the very cultural level, that just gave me such an insight. So I had clients that were losing $500,000 a year. We'd now turn them around, they're making $1 million a year. All because like I had this 3 days of amazing conversations with this very learned Chinese man. And so that's always your fallback. If it doesn't work out, try to get as cultural as you can. Okay. Right, we just want to talk just very quickly on this in this crazy world. Don't take chances and be safe. Tom, did you want to talk quickly on this one?
Yeah, I think just expect the unexpected is really the message we're trying to say here. We certainly did all the planning in the world and got all the meetings developed. What we didn't plan for was the Boston bombing, which occurred midway through our trip. We were lucky that we did put contingency in our itinerary. We were actually at the airport to fly to New York City literally when the bomb went off, and certainly initially we weren't sure how it would affect our plans, but fortunately, because we did have good planning and contacts, we were able to reach out to the people remaining on the tour, and I think we only had one cancellation in total as a result, and as a result of the tragedy that unfolded. And certainly just be prepared and be safe. We had a couple of other incidents in New York, which we also hadn't planned on. But yeah, just my advice to you is just be prepared and make sure that you've got good ways to contact in the event that something terrible like this does unfold. We hope that it doesn't, but as we're seeing in the current world at the moment, there's lots of unexpected things that can occur. So I'll probably leave it at that, Linda.
Yeah, no, it's good. Just that there was safety in us travelling together. We had someone murdered outside of our hotel, not outside the room. We had a very dreadful taxi ride that was quite scary and unsafe in New York when we went to the baseball, and thank God Tom was there. So just finishing it off before we go to question time, I just wanted a bit of personal reflection as to this bloke rang me out of the blue. I didn't really know who he was. We met, we actually formulated, we can do this together. We shared profiles about each other. We actually formulated key points from our objectives. We actually did a massive amount of planning to make sure that we had, for our stakeholders, the people who were paying us to do this, that we were doing as many meetings and as many different meetings as we could to try and take a different road. But the best thing that happened out of this is that Tom and I became great friends. And so basically, that's before we go into questions, is that the best part of the mutual research collaboration was that we have a lifetime friendship. That we're not always talking all the time, but when we need to, we chat and we catch up, and it's just like we're back in saying goodbye at New York again. And so Tom is part of our family now, and he came to our daughter's wedding in 12 months ago. So if you can create those relationships, and in creating those relationships, and you find it when you travel the world with your group and stuff like that, there will be hard times. But I think go back to that thing called emotional intelligence and just really work on actually understanding yourself and understanding others. And that's probably why Tom and I got on so well, because we really made an effort to do that. You want to say anything about that, Tom?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is it's a lifelong mentoring as well. So we constantly challenge one another. So not only is there the private aspect, but certainly if we see a new trend or new initiative that's coming out, we just flick it to one another and basically get opinion from one another on things that are happening. So it's not, don't think of it as a stop-start. You can actually generate a lot of positive networks, relationships externally, but equally internally. So
and then we eat, drink and be merry at a wedding. Anyway, Jodie, we're going to hand back to you basically for question time.
Thank you. So just before we launch into question time, we do have one more poll. So we might just do that. We do have some questions still to answer from the Q&A, but we will go to our third poll, which just is to find out how you're thinking about your research objectives and whether you're a long way down the planning scale or whether you're still just starting. So it's just one question there with 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 options. I did think about putting in an 8th option, which is, I've totally changed my research topic and I have to start again. That happens.
That happens. I'm hoping you can hear the rain on our roof. Have you had any rain?
No, is it rain?
Yeah, it's raining at the moment. Yeah. Like
It's absolutely. It's bucketing down here in Wagga Wagga too. We've got lots of rain.
So where are you, Jodie? Where are you located?
Northern New South Wales. So we got 3 mil on Monday night, which is not enough. We just want a little bit more before the winter.
Yeah. Well, my pastoralists who've just had the worst time have actually got rain today, so I was celebrating with them.
Oh, that's good.
On the phone. Unfortunately, some of them have had to completely destock, so they've got a long journey back. But anyway, that's what we'll work on now.
So there's a question, there's a couple of questions that have been similar. It's just about, I guess, planning, how you plan your meetings, how you plan for meetings that fall through, and how much free space do you think you should put in your planning. So while we're finishing off that poll, if one of you want to jump in with that one.
So I think, one from my perspective, that map we showed you earlier with all the pinpoints on the map, you'll notice that we actually started to cluster some of the people that we wanted to visit and some of the organisations. And generally, we always had a plan of attack where we had probably more than our quota of people that we wanted to visit, but also in a lot of instances when somebody couldn't make it, I'd actually go back to them and say, look, unfortunately, we'd still love to meet with you. Is there someone else within your organisation that could represent on your behalf to actually provide some of the answers to the questions? And more often than not, particularly given that we were targeting some pretty large companies, that actually wasn't a major challenge for many of them. It's when you have small operators like, the 1 or 2 man operators that sometimes that can be a challenge. And when we found in one instance, there was a gentleman that was a software developer in Canada, and he actually had agreed to meet with us right through to the day before that we were planning to meet. And we got an email on the road basically saying that he couldn't make the appointment. But fortunately for us, we had some contingencies in place, and Bruno Basso, for example, the gentleman that I mentioned at the beginning, he was actually based in Michigan. So I was quickly able to actually go back to some of those contingencies that we had and have meetings with alternative people as well, which still served a lot of the purposes that we were trying to achieve. Linda, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that we went to Taiwan first, Tom and I, up there for a conference, and really that face-to-face and actually meeting Bruno and a few others, that actually set us up very, very well for what we wanted to do. So yeah, I think sometimes you have to go somewhere for a conference to try and actually have that level of connection to actually make that next space happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's probably a good strategy that is quite well used, is go to a conference and start your networks off there.
Yeah.
We've got a left field, kind of off topic question that was asked by Johnny earlier on. He's interested in knowing what sort of technology you're using on your farm now, Linda, given that it's eight years from your Nuffield. I mean, you did just mention the fact that you still bounce ideas off each other, and obviously you're in the lifelong learning game.
Yep. Okay, with the consultancy, I'm actually if I just look at where clients are going in terms of efficiencies, where I had quite a long conversation with one of my clients about autonomous machines this morning. So what I'm actually seeing is there's quite a divide happening. The people that into that efficiencies with machinery and things like that, and that cost of capital, they have to be dead set big croppers. They have to, that investment to happen. We're finding they've got to ramp up to such a space. Okay. for me, what happened in terms of like the data analytics and actually trying to find something out there that actually could give us all the answers out in the field, there was a few good ones that I found that are still out there, and they're models. There's other stuff that's coming on board that will actually, like, we'll be able to put probes in the ground. And I didn't show that. I've got a bit of video as to those things that are emerging that will help us with our in-field decision making. But really what happened, I was doing a lot of training. I did training contracts, you know, and like I said, I took a lot of people through training. When I travelled the world and I looked at my tools that I had in terms of like analytics of businesses, I couldn't find anything else that was like that. So basically I realised that what a valuable package of tools I'd developed over the years and what intellectual property I had with those. And that's why I actually ramped up the consulting so much more, because I realised that there was nothing like it out there. So I'm always thinking, how do I actually get this out here so that I actually have like some cloud-based tools and things like that. But we're really back to where I was in 2013, that the cost is just so expensive for me to do that. Am I better off to actually be a solo practitioner that I give that very personalised consulting, and maybe my succession plan is bringing in my son, because I just am finding that one size does not fit all when you talk this in-field analytics that we're trying to have as one tool. And so it's still a conundrum for me as to how we can develop those tools so that people can make those decisions out in the field. Not so much about the production. The production stuff is well covered. We've got so much happening there. It's more about that analytical management, data gathering, and actually making those decisions, and really good management decisions and really good strategic decisions.
Thanks, Linda. We've gone over our allotted hour, but I think Linda and Tom are happy to stay on and answer more questions if we've got some more. Tracy in New Zealand has asked, Linda, what do you mean by social community? Is that an actual community or a virtual community?
I think that the social community that has been built with Twitter and with Facebook and things like that. What I was trying to explore with Facebook and is you have a huge social community. Don't you have some sort of social responsibility to actually educate about agriculture, to actually help us develop tools that can actually be kinder to the environment, that we can make better decisions as farmers. We've got this beautiful stewardship that we actually do very well. So let's tell the story back the other way. And so it was really pulling together all those social communities. What's the one girl that we went to see, Tom, that she was running ag?
Yep. So I was actually going to say, so one of the people we met was Ag Chat Foundation, and her name was Emily Zwever. So she was a dairy farmer from Zwever Farms in the US, and certainly her role was in developing Ag Chat was based on a premise that there wasn't any formalized network at the time to have conversations about key issues facing farmers and farming communities. And so they developed, many of you have probably heard the term of Ag Chat and Ag Chat Oz, which is a Twitter-based chat that happens every Tuesday night here in Australia. I'm not sure about the timing in the United States, but certainly it was used to enable large volumes of discussion to be had. I know in Australia it's certainly taken off, and with quite a large sector of our agronomy network participating on some of those chats that occur. So yeah, certainly part of the scope, and not only with Ag Chat, but some of the other technology companies and social media companies that we met with, even the universities, was looking at how we improve information dialogue in a more efficient manner with farmers, and also the research community for that matter, to make sure that the latest developments and knowledge that's being generated out of millions of dollars of research is being widely disseminated. We
wanted to try and draw in those social communities and actually help them be part of a solution, with the environment and our farming. That's really what we're looking at. Like, instead of us doing it in isolated silos, like, let's actually get these guys interested and actually like be integrated so the divide comes together. And Facebook was really interested in what we were talking about. They loved it. But they basically said that like we needed to sort of come up with some form of like prototype and they would listen more. Yeah, but that was just a chat with developers, and they gave us an insight into when they're looking at developing something, what did they want to do. I tried really, really, really hard to get into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation because they were just up Seattle, I think, and because I just thought, yeah, they are so into like environmental issues, but they're also very business savvy, I felt. And I thought that they actually could be a good connector for us to actually like talk about like how can we do this together. Businesses have to be profitable, but how do we do it so that like the social community understands that, but we also, they help us build tools to make good decisions.
Okay, well, if we've got no more questions, I think we'll end it there. Thank you, Tom and Linda, very much for your time and the effort that you've put into crafting this presentation for the 2020 Scholars. I think it's been really good from my point of view. I've really enjoyed it, and I think the nuggets of information in there are absolutely gold. So for all the participants, thank you very much for stopping by. There will be a post-webinar survey that you'll get the link for, so please look out for that tomorrow. And I hope everybody has a good day or a good evening wherever you are. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you
Thank
later.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ta-da.